really with OpenAI, I think it kind of changed the approach, and it came to the completely new audiences, which never really had the same kind of exposure into these technologies before. Obviously now with AI as well, like it's another reset happening in the market, which is extremely exciting.
Please join me in welcoming Hanna Helin. She's bringing over 16 years of experience in senior technology and business leadership. Hanna currently leads the Global Technology Innovation Team at LSEG's CTO office. Hanna has tremendous experience in delivering strategic initiatives and driving innovative business transformation in complex and fast-moving environments. Having had the opportunity to be at the forefront of cutting-edge technologies, including cloud transition, big data, and now, of course, AI. Hanna's current focus is almost naturally on AI. She's recognized as a WeQual 2023 award winner, top 25 women in AI, and CDO's Magazine Power Women list. Welcome, Hanna. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Vahe. It's great to be here.
So it's such an interesting and great career that you have had so far. What inspired you actually to pursue a career in technology leadership?
I think my technology journey isn't very traditional. So I've been doing all sorts of different roles throughout my career. I actually started in sales back in the days and then moved into different kind of business roles throughout my career. But then about 10 years ago, I started working with public cloud, more from the strategy perspective, and as the kind of like market, financial services market around cloud started evolving, so I started getting involved more in that topic and really starting to see that very exciting dynamic around technology and kind of like what kind of transformation it can actually lead to many of the organizations. Like it's almost like a reset for many of the institutions. And then obviously now with AI as well, like it's another reset happening in the market, which is extremely exciting. But I think, overall, I feel like I've been very interested in technologies throughout my life and throughout my career. Like I always have followed very closely what is happening in this space. And I remember my early days when I had like an older brother who was always very interested in technologies as well. I was always following him as he got a little bit older as he was. He got his first computer, so I was very jealous about that and was always very interested in what he's doing there. So I think that was kind of like my early days. But I think it's really this kind of like interest in technology that has led me to where I am at the moment.
Wonderful. And what do you think that when you pointed out cloud, that was of course a very big step in the evolution of technology in the last decade. But AI, I think, is topping that right now. What do you think are the most significant milestones in the development of AI?
Yeah, I think it's maybe a little bit cheesy to say this, but I think the big advancement was really obviously OpenAI ChatGPT release. So I think that really felt very different comparing to what had happened before. So I think my observation before that was that AI was very much in the kind of like data science workflow. It was in those very specific, more kind of like hands-on workflows before that. Obviously, ML was all around already and has been for a long time already. But really with OpenAI, I think it kind of changed the approach and it came to the completely new audiences, which never really had the same kind of exposure into these technologies before. I remember I was asked to do like a keynote speech during the time when OpenAI released ChatGPT. And I remember like I'm, a very last minute person in a way, like I started preparing for that and it conveniently was released. And I was like, okay, well, let's test out like how does it work actually for keynote writing. Astonishing, right? Like, again, within, the work that would have taken for a while for me to do, here we are like within 3 minutes, you have like the output. So it was quite a, obviously interesting keynote to do. I was obviously giving the credit to OpenAI as well and use those examples that look, here we are, like it's quite a much more impressive keynote that I would have, written at the time.
And I think OpenAI ChatGPT was also the first demonstration of a computationally universal AI model, right? So basically, you can use it for almost anything. But I also do think that previous technologies were necessary to actually achieve this, right? I mean, cloud was probably necessary, big data was necessary to actually accumulate enough data for these things. Where do you think, how did the transition go from cloud, big data to now maybe AI?
I think you are totally right, because I think cloud, I think initially as it started, it was a lot about that infrastructure play and who is hosting your infrastructure in essence. But even that having evolved into the discussion around, data and analytics capabilities in the cloud environment, and how do you draw best insights from that data. And then now adding the AI on top of that as an overlay to get to the conclusion even faster than ever before. And I think why cloud was so important as well is that it was kind of like all these big technology providers, how they were able to create the ecosystem of different players, for example, in the startup community, to really get that foundational platform to get to the new audiences. So I think it also like helps with this current AI trend that also startups will be able to get access to these new audiences, especially from the enterprise perspective, much faster as well. So I think it will help them. Obviously, there's a little bit angle there as well, that it's a lot of competition clearly in this space. So it can be also perhaps a little bit interesting from the startup perspective. But again, it's kind of like the platform really that can be used to extend for those new audiences.
At the same time, I'm asking myself that while it is enabling so much new things to happen, it is also limiting to some extent, because basically it's hoarding all the computational power of the world, almost, you have to say, in a couple of data centers controlled by a couple of companies. And at the end, it turns out that you couldn't actually easily train an AI model of the size of a ChatGPT, because you probably don't even have access to the computational power, right? Is that a
Yes.
concern?
Yeah, I think it is. And I think, it's also kind of like concentration. I think overall from the development perspective, like I think when we look at the AI innovation and I guess innovation more widely as well, it is really quite concentrated on Silicon Valley as well. So I think on top of that kind of like compute power that would be coming requires obviously a lot of funding and money being concentrated into the, again, big tech guys. And then also the development being concentrated in those specific areas. Absolutely interesting dynamic there.
Yeah, I think the only small bastion is France that tries to withstand with their Mistral series of language models, which I think are pretty good. So while I think we both agree that AI is, when it comes to language models, computationally universal, it is really great. How do you see the role of humans in connection with AI? I mean, the concept of hybrid intelligence is our theme here. What is your stance on this?
Yeah, I think like when I look at it more from the personal perspective, so I think there's definitely a promise there to, like, I think the whole discussion about co-pilot experience, or I think many people describe AI as kind of like your graduate or an assistant, which will do those sort of like manual tasks that you had to do previously. So paying bills, or, booking travels, or, submitting your taxes, stuff like that, which, takes a lot of time. And you could free up that time to do something completely different. I think that itself will evolve how all of us will work, both in our personal lives and then in our normal roles as well going forward. I think there's a huge promise specifically around that. But then obviously at the same time, like, I think there has been obviously lots of discussions in terms of, privacy of the data, what kind of information you're actually feeding into those models. That's obviously also a huge risk from the individual perspective. And you have to be, I think we are still in that time that obviously this trend is fast evolving, and again, much more education is needed for individuals to know how to really go about with these capabilities.
Yeah, when it comes to privacy, I think it was Samsung, right, to ask the question to ChatGPT about their code base, and then it ended up in the training data, or actually even predicted data. That can of course happen, and code is important, but it's just code, and personal information is actually more important and more dangerous. I think agree. And there's also lots of regulation in Europe going on, right? I mean, in continental Europe, we have GDPR. Um, how do you stand with does this regulation going to hinder this continent to keep up with these AI trends, or some people argue that it might actually be a advantage?
I think it's needed, in my opinion. Like clearly, Europe has been leading in this area with the EU AI Act, but I think it's definitely needed. Like I think the risks are definitely there, and you need to have these guardrails to really, again, guide companies and people through the process. I think it can become quite dangerous, otherwise. And on the other hand, like I think many of the enterprises are also, especially in the financial services industry, they know how to navigate around these topics and, start creating this safer environment to work on. And I think there's a lot of collaboration happening in this space, specifically, kind of like consortiums having the discussion that, for example, how financial institutions are working together and creating more kind of like common and safe frameworks for their organizations. So I think it's definitely good approach from that perspective. Probably more global collaboration would be required. Like I think that overarching theme where you could, in idea scenario, have all the continents working together on some common practices can be. It's probably far-fetched in the current environment, but that would be obviously ideal state to have that kind of best practices discussion. I think the challenge is going to be that AI is going to impact so widely to the society that are we in the danger that we are also leaving specific people, audiences behind with this specific theme. So I think it's much bigger considerations that needs to be, and it's kind of like governmental discussion that we need to have around that specifically.
Yeah, it's very interesting, right? And you can see already governments stepping in, right? So some governments actually either fund, even train, right? Abu Dhabi trained their own language model with, it was the university, but Abu Dhabi financed it, and the Falcon series of language models, and then France and Germany also put lots of funds of companies to train models and to advance in this area because they see probably a risk there.
Yes.
How do you you made a good segue to LSEG. How do you think there about large language models? Is that something where you think you should have your own? Are you training one? Are you using public ones? Have you cooperations with others? Or
Yeah, so we are looking at AI in a couple of different ways. So as an organization, we are very focused, like we have gone through quite a big transformation, I would say, past couple of years. So basically London Stock Exchange buying Refinitiv, big data analytics business, very global organization, and becoming LSEG. Big evolution, obviously, behind that. And I think as an organization, we have been using AI for a long time. I would say specifically around our, data management processes, and as we bring in new content for our financial services customers, AI has always been there and for a long time. Obviously, with large language models, we are staying very close to the market, seeing that how our financial services customers will want to evolve their workflows going forward. So first of all, we are very focused on that, kind of like those sort of like new interfaces and solutions that our customers will need in order to analyze the information better. And one of the things that we did is that we formed a partnership with Microsoft as well in this space, where we are basically re-envisioning as well some of those workflows. How do our data sets fit with Office 365 or Teams environments? Obviously, the different, AI models, things like that. So a lot of, opportunities in that space. And then we have been looking at like basically our existing solutions, and then how do we introduce AI and large language models into them. Examples could be, for example, search powered by AI, or document processing powered by AI. And then thirdly, like a lot of pieces around sort of like more like operational efficiency use cases. How do we leverage AI to perhaps simplify some of our internal processes and automate different tasks? And clearly, there's always obviously a discussion as well, like how does AI really kind of like how does it change each of our workflows going forward? So I think, again, what has been interesting with this trend specifically is that even within my group, like we have started getting those very excited requests from completely new teams, which wouldn't necessarily have contacted us in the past, asking that, oh, like we are seeing that this is happening in the marketplace. Can we get a little bit more education how to go about it? We are very active, like from our perspective, we are screening obviously the market constant, like there's always another model coming around the corner, and we are widely leveraging actually all of the market models, depending really on the use case that we will be using it.
Yeah. You touched on many interesting concepts here. I call it actually precise language models rather than small, because I feel like the small makes it
good way of putting it.
Actually, yeah. But the problem there is you can do, of course, a supervised fine tuning, right? With the data that you have, like there's no question about it. But you brought that ChatGPT was actually the turning point for many people. And then ChatGPT's unique feature is, of course, this human feedback or human preference training at the end, right?
Yeah.
Where humans actually rank the results that were generated. That, of course, you can't build in a pre-training data set. So meaning that people actually have to do it. Now, you were touching around workflows a lot. I am obviously a very strong believer in hybrid intelligence. So I do believe that a language model at the end is, with these dense vectors, a stream representation of information. And a discrete representation of information requires not only some kind of reasoning and knowledge, but also judgment, like human judgment. And that judgment layer is probably at this stage not possible to be built by an AI model. It can, of course, mimic the judgment layer of humans by learning the preferences of humans. But because the judgment layer is changing over time, right? I always bring this example. I think in 1971, women were not allowed to vote in Switzerland, right? I mean, that's not very long time ago, and Switzerland is one of the most advanced countries in this world right now, right? So you see that very, very bad practices back then, and luckily changed. So our values are changing, and so it could be like a race that AI constantly has to learn new values that humans come up with. So I do believe that part is true, but there is, of course, another danger that I think we are sometimes underestimating is a large language model doesn't need to be intelligent, or AI doesn't need to be intelligent, or doesn't even need to be able to reason to do big harm. If you think of a simple Twitter algorithm can almost decide what an election is going to be. And that's like the most simple algorithm that you can imagine, right? Can have a huge effect, right? And I think it's very hard for us to anticipate the effects of many of those decisions that we are taking right now. Right?
And it's a good point, because I think like overall as well, when we start looking at these more complex use cases, like I'm thinking the whole, let's say, environmental issues, for example, where there hasn't been really resolution necessarily from human perspective. So actually AI can bring that additional overlay, bringing together those different patterns and then resolving it much faster. There was interesting conversation between Bill Gates and Sam Altman about this specific topic as well, in terms of Bill was asking Sam that what do I do in my life, because I love to resolve these very difficult challenges, like for example the situations in Africa. How can I kind of like continue what I love when AI is coming in and kind of like resolving those challenges. And it was actually interesting to see like what like Sam Altman was basically responding to that he feels that we are in the stage where human is resolving these bigger challenges for the last time before AI will come in. I thought that was quite interesting statement.
I think we will look back at this point, and this is going to be the first time that history is not solely written by humans. And
Yes,
maybe after a couple of decades, even maybe even less than a decade, it will be solely written by AI, maybe. Right?
yes,
And we have to be aware of that, because at the end, an AI model is just, or you can see an AI model as a different representation of data, right? And of course, due to the almost infinite scalability, it can, of course, also build much more complex realities than the human brain can do at the end of the day. And there will, of course, come a point where we cannot keep up anymore, right? And do you think that this is also an interesting point? Is, of course, we have achieved this universality in language models, but not with graphical things, right? Like a model that can detect a Coca-Cola can in an image cannot be used to detect a table, right? Because it's not universal in that sense. Do you think that we will achieve that anytime soon, or do you think that that problem is so much more complex that it will take much longer to actually achieve this universality in
it's a
multimodal?
good question. Maybe I'm not close enough with those use cases to comment like how soon the development can really happen in that space specifically. And is it like, what are the challenges there? Like, is it too concentrated on the actual data sets that you are training it with? It's a really interesting question. I can't give forecast there.
Anna, I give you a secret. I am researching in this area, and I also have no idea.
Yeah,
So I think nobody does. we,
yeah,
we just
yeah,
need to see what happens. It's almost like with these language models, where 6 months after they have been released, we realize their abilities, their capabilities,
yes,
and I think it is just a trial and error, and we will see what happens.
yeah.
But there are very different predictions. There are predictions that this year this will be totally solved, and their prediction it's not even solved in 10 years. So the range is very, very big.
Yeah, and I wonder whether we're in the same kind of situation as you mentioned, where we kind of like we're suddenly in the whole kind of like Facebook conversation once again, where Facebook was used to, again, like political environment in the US, for example, like used for that kind of promotion and approach. So again, like as these new models and practical applications will come through further, like then we realize in hindsight like how big danger, or maybe opportunity as well they could be at times.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, I agree. I mean, your point, we have always regulation in our back pocket, I think
yes,
is really important in that sense, because right now it seems like companies regulate themselves. Like Google, I think, just pulled away of allowing their models to create human images.
yeah,
So they could be misused. But obviously, we cannot rely on a company to be, to, to represent the ethical values that society does. So we probably need a regulation in that sense to do that.
yeah,
Um, so I mean, we talked a little bit about ethics already, but I think another important point when we talk about ethics is, and I think you touched upon this already, is this: the world has very different views about ethics, right? There's not a global ethics around the world, and like China is dealing it very, very different, than the US does, and definitely more very much different than Europe does. Do you think that these differences will be even accelerated through AI and actually cause even larger problems in future than they already cause?
I think that's a valid concern, because it is kind of, it does feel like even from the conversation specifically last year around diversity of these models and a lot of concerns in that space, like it does feel a little bit like the kind of the same mistakes that have happened with internet and obviously the content that is there, they have been replicated now with AI once again. And also I think to your point about backgrounds, like US training its own models, China, Russia, so forth, like coming from different angles and from different purposes will be, I think, the issue there going forward as well. And I think again, like even the diversity around the people who are actually creating the models as well. So you kind of like think conceptually that you are doing the right thing, but in the end, the outcome looks quite different. I think that is a challenge.
I think Suleiman is pointing that out a lot. The DeepMind co-founder is saying this. He's calling it the revenge effect, basically, that you are trying to do something good, but then it turns out to be actually even worse in some cases, because it was not clear in which direction it will go. I think these are concerns. It almost feels like we need. I mean, I haven't been alive at that point, but I've seen lots of videos about it. It feels like we need this atoms for peace kind of moment where some country stands up and says, like, look, we are gonna democratize this so that it is not going to be a huge issue for the world, because nuclear weapons have been the most difficult thing to deal with, and to large extent we have been able to deal with it somehow. It feels like we need that kind of moment pretty soon for AI too.
Kind of United Nations kind of approach, global United Nations for AI in a sense, like getting everybody to collaborate together. I think it's a valid point. It's a valid point, and I think the whole, even the way again that the models can be used, like it's cyber attacks, for risk attacks, things like that.
Yeah, but we should not forget, I guess, all the good points of it, right?
That's the thing, exactly.
We drifted very far away. Like I have to put it a little bit back on the good side again,
Yeah.
and I think you too, because yours most of your life is right now evolving around AI, I assume.
Yeah.
So I think when this is, I think, the Obama doctrine at the end of the day, if enough good people are exposed to it, then something good probably will come out.
Exactly. Absolutely.
Exactly. So how do you see that? I mean, you have a tremendously important role in a tremendously important organization. So you are not only with your decisions, not only taking what's happening, but also shaping actually what's happening, right? So what do you foresee? What are the biggest challenges? And not necessarily in terms of AI, but in terms also of a business perspective and perspective of how you organize the company and things like that. What do you see are there the challenges that you need to overcome?
Yeah. So I think for any large enterprise, like you kind of like really need to start thinking AI first. I think it's easier for startups to really go after this team very rapid way, and they can kind of like build from the ground up, leverage the tools, and perhaps again educate everybody very quickly on AI. I think with larger enterprises, it comes back to this sort of like end-to-end approach, that how do you make sure that everybody across the organization are obviously familiar with these capabilities and then can start leveraging them appropriate way. And especially last year, like we were very focused on sort of making sure that we take even our sort of like standard governance processes to the next level with the introduction of large language models. So I think we have been lucky in that matter, that in the organization like LSEG, there's a lot of expertise in this area and people who are able to ask the right questions and know what the potential risks might be. So one of the examples that we did, for example, was that we basically brought a working group together around the same table last year, where we basically brought in, legal, risk, our business, technology teams, product teams around the same table, having the discussion that how do we take kind of like reviewing our existing governance processes, how do we take those to the next level with AI screening, and that's one way of doing it. But on our perspective as well, like it has obviously required a lot of sort of education internally, again, making sure that all these different teams know what AI is, what does it actually mean for them. This continues to be obviously like it's an ongoing program that we are driving through. Clearly, a lot of changes all the time happening in the marketplace. So we are also educating ourselves constantly. Oh, here's another model. Like, what does it actually mean for LSEG? And then obviously, like, we stay very close to the client, like where the client will want to go next, like how they sort of like data analytics, consumption behaviors, how that will change going forward, what might be those new endpoints that they would be looking for from us, and how they want to leverage large language models in their work. But I think it's really important for any enterprise to be very serious about this topic. I've seen various different organizations doing it slightly different ways. So some of them have kind of like more, I would say, concentrated AI teams. Like they set up like a small group that is working across the organization, or kind of like resolving it for everybody, centrally. And then another way that you have is really this kind of like more kind of a collaborative approach, where you have almost like champions across your different business lines, and then getting that connectivity and working together across the business. But it's obviously huge potential, like very positive potential for the organizations. I think there was, I think Jamie Dimon was even saying, I think this was like end of last year, where he mentioned about the whole, I think 3.5 work week, that you don't need to, like, you can spend like longer weekend. And I guess you can turn it around as well. Like maybe you continue 5 days a week, and then you increase productivity with AI. So I think it's again has a huge potential from that perspective. And I think what is positive again with this trend is that I think many of the senior managers across the industry have also seen the power of this immediately, and they are asking their teams like, okay, how do we get going with this trend? So there's definitely, I think, positive momentum in the financial services market with this.
And the way I understood your view on this is you're setting more on this shared knowledge concept, right? It's like educating as many people as you can, and then build like a shared knowledge, so like almost like English as a language,
Yes.
AI as a shared knowledge, so that communication, advancements, and so on are easier,
Yes.
rather than having centralized teams.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we have taken the approach where, for example, from the technology perspective, we want to take everybody on the technology side to this AI journey. So basically giving them the tools that they can then use to make their work better and get it to the next level, rather than like selecting a small team that would be doing it separately. So I think that has worked well so far.
Very interesting. So thank you so much for this conversation. It was so interesting. I could continue for another 4 hours, but I assume
Absolutely.
a lot of work to do. Where can our listeners reach you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. So just find Hanna Helin, and you should hit to my profile there. So you can follow me there and see different things on AI that we're working on.
Thank you so much. Very, very refreshing, very insightful, very, very interesting. Thank you very much for your time and your insights.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this edition of Hybrid Minds. This podcast is brought to you by Cognize, the first of its kind intelligent document processing company, which automates unstructured data with hybrid intelligence and a data-centric AI platform. To learn more, visit cognize.com. And be sure to catch the next episode of Hybrid Minds wherever you get your podcasts.